and welcome to my channel. My name is Jara. I primarily teach people how to garden and grow food, but every now and then I like to make videos showing you guys what I do with all of the fruits and vegetables that I harvest from my garden. Today's video is a super important one because this is something that I do every summer at the end of my tomato season, because yes, my tomato season ends when summer arrives. It just gets way too hot here. So it's a little bit opposite compared to a lot of you that are gardening in a state north of me. But my tomato season is over. I've harvested a ton of tomatoes and I'm going to process all of this to make fresh homemade tomato sauce. And then I'm going to show you guys how to can it. I don't know about you, but I am a super busy person and I do not have time to remove the skins and the seeds from all of these tomatoes and then process them all. That literally takes hours and hours and hours. So I definitely have a lot of tips and different kinds of equipment and things that I use to speed up this whole process. So I'm going to share my method and technique for quickly processing a lot of tomatoes into tomato sauce and canning it. To begin, we have to talk about these tomatoes. I don't know how many tomatoes I have here, okay? It's just a lot, but this technique that I'm about to show you, it doesn't really matter the quantity of tomatoes you have. Obviously, the more that you have, the more sauce you're gonna make, but the technique, the method, everything is the same despite the quantity of tomatoes that you might have. My tomato season is super long. It's basically 9 months in a row of a growing season, so I harvest a lot of tomatoes, but I only process and can them all into tomato sauce one time, and that's at the end of my season. So as the months go by and I'm harvesting tomatoes, I like to freeze them all in gallon-size freezer bags. So I will just, throughout the entire season, keep filling these up one after another and storing them away in a freezer. So that way, when the day comes that it's the end of my season, I've harvested absolutely all of the tomatoes and I have time to make sauce, I just start pulling out all these bags and I do it all at once. The other added benefit of freezing the tomatoes before you start making sauce with it is you do have to defrost them. And in that process, they start releasing a lot of extra liquid. Basically, it's almost clear, just extra water liquid that these tomatoes are gonna give off. And that is the same liquid that you would have to cook out of your tomato sauce later, unless you want watery tomato sauce. So not only am I gonna show you a way to quickly remove the seeds and the skin out of all of the tomatoes to make a really nice, smooth sauce, but the process of freezing and defrosting the tomatoes also saves you a bunch of time because it will release all of that extra liquid. So when the day finally comes that you decide you're gonna start making your tomato sauce, 24 hours prior, you're gonna start taking out all of your frozen bags of tomatoes. Place all of those bags in either your kitchen sink or some kind of a plastic like tote storage container to hold all of this, because it will release a lot of juice and it will go all over the place. Then the morning of, you're going to take out all of the tomatoes, just pour them out of your Ziploc bags. They should be kind of squishy and defrosted. And you're gonna put them in some strainers or maybe even a big container like this one that has holes in there, because they still have a lot of liquid. So this will allow them to have some additional time to get that liquid out. So that's where I'm at right now. This has been sitting all morning, releasing all of that extra liquid. And now these tomatoes are ready for processing. To process all of these tomatoes as quickly as possible, I am using a KitchenAid mixer with this attachment here. This is called a fruit and vegetable strainer. I've had this KitchenAid mixer for more than 10 years and it still works perfectly. So I understand they're a little bit expensive, but I can't tell you how much I use this to process or make dishes or cook all of the ingredients and things from my garden, including this fruit and vegetable strainer. For example, I use this to make a lot of fruit juices. I will harvest my fresh muscadine grapes and make fresh muscadine grape juice with this. It's fantastic. But what this attachment does is that it removes the skin and seeds out of your vegetables like tomatoes or the grapes like the muscadine grapes, all in one go. So very easy, and it cuts out the time spent manually taking the skins and seeds out of the tomatoes. And quite honestly, if I had to do that manually, I probably wouldn't bother making tomato sauce at all. So I absolutely love this. It works great. It makes very nice, smooth tomato sauce. Now you could just take all of your tomatoes and throw them in the blender as is with the skin and seeds and make some sort of a tomato sauce, and that's fine. But I really enjoy the texture when you remove the skin and the seeds off. It's just a lot smoother. Almost always when I've tried to blend it all up, I'm left with some strands of the skin and it just isn't as smooth as I prefer for tomato sauce. So that's why a lot of people, including myself, go the extra step of removing the skin and the seeds. And of course, I will put links in the description to all of the supplies, everything that I'm using, so you can find it. And another added bonus is that kids, like my son here, really love to work this machine, so he's gonna help me process all of these tomatoes today. All right, so real quick, just to explain how this works. You put your tomatoes here in this chute. It's gonna be pushed through this grinding attachment right here. On this end, all of the skin and seeds are gonna come out, so So we're gonna put a bowl there to catch all of that. And then on this end down here is where all of our tomato sauce is gonna end up. So it gets all of the meat portion of the tomatoes, which is what you want for the sauce, and it dumps it back here. Now, just another tiny little detail if you wanna get nice, thick tomato sauce. I have this bowl here to catch the sauce portion that comes out of here. But I also put a mesh strainer like this one right on top of here. So as the tomato sauce gets dumped in here, oftentimes, no matter how good I am at trying to get as much of that extra water out of these frozen tomatoes, there is still some left. So if you put this mesh strainer first, it's gonna catch a lot of that thicker, meaty tomato sauce and allow some of that extra water, if there is some more, to continue draining out into here. And you'll notice that the liquid in here, it's pretty watery. It still has a lot of like color to it, a reddish tone from the tomatoes and a lot of flavor. So use this liquid in cooking, like making some broth or adding into soups. All right, so we're gonna get started. I'm gonna let Roland do all of the work and push all the tomatoes through. We begin by pushing some of the tomatoes through the chute. Then it gets pushed through the fruit and vegetable strainer. Then on this end, all of that skin and seed comes out. Some people like to collect this and pass it through for a second time. You're gonna get a little bit more tomato sauce out of it if you decide to do that. And then on this end, here is the sauce coming out and it's landing in the strainer, so any extra water can be strained out. Going good. All right, let's put some more. Good job. All right, so after a little bit, the mesh strainer that's holding all the good stuff, that nice thick tomato sauce, is going to start getting a little bit full. So I'm just going to dump it out into another container. Look at how thick it is. I didn't have to spend any additional time to evaporate out or cook out that extra liquid. It's perfect. And here's all that extra liquid. Like I said, don't dump it out. Add it to your soups, vegetable broth, chili, all of that. It adds a lot of good flavor. All right, so I took a quick break from processing the tomatoes so I can start getting all of my canning supplies going. First, you want to get your canner. I just have a simple canner right here. Fill it up with water, get this nice and boiling. Then I'm going to get the rest of my supplies out so everything is nearby and ready to go. This is a 32-ounce jar and the lids that go with them. To sterilize these jars, you just bring this up to boiling and pop the jars in there for like 5 minutes before you start filling it with the tomato sauce. To sterilize the lids, just take them apart if you have these kind. Put them in another bowl and pour boiling hot water over them. Let it sit for at least 10 minutes and then these are ready to go. I just removed them all and laid them out so they can get dry before we start the whole canning process. And just some other supplies and things that you're going to need. It's really helpful if you have a funnel. I am using the wide mouth type of jars. It has a wide opening like that, which is easy, but it's definitely way easier when you have a funnel to help you pour the sauce through. I also have this gripper to grab the jars when we're done processing and remove them out of the boiling hot water so you don't burn yourself. And then we need some lemon juice. You can get fresh lemon juice that you press yourself or use the lemon juice concentrate. We're going to be adding 2 tablespoons per 32-ounce jar. And that is to acidify our entire mixture, so to speak. And that will deter bacteria and stuff like that from growing inside of the jars when you put them away for storage. And I just like some regular distilled white vinegar. I just take some of this, dab it onto a towel, and then clean the rim of the jars after we put our tomato sauce and everything, just to make sure that rim is really clean and sterile, that no growth is going to occur on there. Lastly, you're going to need like a towel or something to put on the surface of your kitchen counter. I'm using like this dish drying mat. The reason why you need a towel or some kind of fabric, soft type of texture on the surface of your counter is because when you remove the jars out of here, they're super, super hot. And if you put them directly on your cold kitchen counter, it can cause them to crack. So you just want to make sure you set them on an old towel or something like that to prevent that from occurring. And that's pretty much all that you need for basic canning equipment and supplies. Again, I will list all of this stuff in the description below. All right, so here's what we're left with, and this took more like 30 minutes for us to process everything. Here's our nice thick sauce. It is ready to be used if you wanted to start cooking with it right away. Here's all that extra water that continued to drain out of our sauce. A Another great idea to use this is for the soup-based flavor if you make hot pot. And here's all the skin and seeds. You could use this in your compost, or what I'm gonna do is put this in my dehydrator to turn it into tomato powder. When you're canning, I really recommend that you get a jar lifter, because if you use tongs or something like that, sometimes the water will spill out and drip back down your arm. It's happened to me before and you get burned. So make sure you have all of the supplies necessary that are made specifically for canning. But these jars are done. They've been boiling. They are now sterilized. We're gonna remove them and put them on that soft surface so they don't crack. And then we can start filling them. Once the jars have cooled down a little bit, we're gonna put our 2 tablespoons of lemon juice per jar. If your jars are smaller than this, you're gonna use a little bit less lemon juice. So I will put that in the directions for all of this that will be located on my website. And then we're gonna start ladling in the sauce. You need to leave a little bit of headspace. This is probably about 1 inch worth of the headspace here. Leave it empty. Once all the jars are filled, dip a paper towel or a kitchen towel into that white vinegar and then wipe the rims off. That way we know the seal is nice and clean and we don't get any bacteria growth. All right, so now we're ready to process this. We're gonna drop this into our canner and let it boil for 40 minutes with the lid on it. Once they're all in, make sure there's at least like 1 inch of water above the top of these jars. Make sure they're just completely submerged. Then put the lid on it and let it boil for 40 minutes. All right, it's been 40 minutes. I turned the heat off, and then we're gonna scoot this off the heating element just to help it start the process of cooling down a little bit, and also take off the lid. Let this sit like this for at least 5, maybe 10 minutes, just to kind of cool down a little bit before we start removing the jars. Then take them out of the pot very carefully. Then we're gonna let them cool down for 24 hours. You might hear some popping noises because as they cool down, it creates kind of like a suction that will pull this lid down and create an indent. That's how you know that these are properly sealed. All right, so that's the entire process of how to can and process your own tomato sauce from scratch. I hope my tips and the certain equipment and supplies that I use really help you speed up the entire process, so that way it just makes it easier for you to can a whole bunch of your tomatoes. I will put general directions or instructions in the description of this video, but if you want something that you can like copy, save, print, I will put a copy of all the directions for this process on the blog section of my website under the recipes, which I will also link that below. If you enjoyed this video, a big thumbs up would help me out more than you know, and make sure you subscribe to my channel so you're notified of when I post something new, whether it be some of my recipe videos or my gardening tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.